The federal courtroom went completely silent as Judge Edward Chen leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Pam Bondi. The tension was unbearable. What happened next would shock the nation and rattle Trump's inner circle. The 66-year-old judge was about to deliver a scathing rebuke, broadcast live for all to see. Bondi, Trump's nominee for Attorney General, had entered the San Francisco courtroom confident she could control the story. She came armed with her usual political talking points, ready to defend Trump's policies with her signature assertiveness. The 59-year-old former Florida egg was used to bulldozing through interviews, but this time, the tables were about to turn. Bondi had relied on the same approach she used in congressional hearings and media appearances: speak loudly, dodge criticism, and turn every question into a defense of Trump. But Judge Chen had different plans. This wasn't a friendly committee or a news segment. This was his courtroom, where the Constitution, rules, and political posturing meant nothing. What he said next left Bondi stunned, revealing the truth she had tried to hide. Beneath all her confidence, she was completely unprepared for the legal battle ahead. Before we get into this shocking courtroom moment that's taking the internet by storm, hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss out. Don't miss a single moment of this unbelievable political showdown. This wasn't just another court hearing, it was a clash between judicial authority and political ambition, and only one side would leave with their credibility intact. With cameras rolling and the nation watching, Judge Chen was about to show who really holds the power in a courtroom. At 66, this Obama-appointed judge embodies what the Trump administration fears most: an independent judiciary that won't bend to political pressure. Born in Taiwan and raised in California, Chen rose from humble beginnings as a public defender, building a reputation on a simple rule: the law comes first, politics come last. Chen rose to the federal bench purely on merit, and his record speaks for itself. He's the judge who blocked Trump's Muslim ban, overturned immigration policies, and consistently stood against government overreach. Chen doesn't just interpret the law, he defends it from those trying to manipulate it for political gain. What makes him especially formidable to Trump's allies is his precise, methodical approach, backed by decades of experience. He doesn't grandstand or give emotional speeches like the politicians he faces. Instead, he asks the question that cuts through all the noise: where's your legal authority? And when politicians can't answer, their arguments crumble. Chen tears apart their arguments with the precision of a skilled craftsman. In legal circles, his reputation is unmatched. Fellow judges call him unshakable and intensely focused on constitutional law. His clerks say he treats every case like a Supreme Court hearing, studying every brief, precedent, and anticipating every possible move. This is not a judge who can be bullied by political rhetoric or swayed by powerful connections. Pam Bondi, on the other hand, represents the Trump political machine: all confidence, little substance. The former Florida Attorney General turned loyalist has spent years honing the art of political theater. At 59, she's perfected the skill of projecting authority and deflecting tough questions, but she's about to face a test she wasn't ready for. Bondi relied on talking points to dodge tough questions, turning legal hearings into something resembling campaign rallies. Her rise in Trump's circle shows where loyalty outweighs competence in the MAGA world. She defended Trump during his first impeachment, challenged the 2020 election results without proof, and now was in line to become Attorney General. Her main credentials: absolute loyalty to Trump and saying whatever he needed her to. But Bondi had a critical weakness that Judge Chen was ready to expose: she confuses political theater with legal reasoning. In politics, you can succeed by being the loudest in the room, deflecting with emotion, and spinning challenges into attacks on Trump. In Chen's courtroom, however, victories come from having the law on your side, citing real precedents, and building logical, evidence-based arguments. Bondi was about to learn the hard way that political theatrics don't work in court. Her preparation exposed everything wrong with the Trump approach to governance. Instead of studying the law, she relied on talking points. Instead of analyzing the Constitution, she rehearsed sound bites. Instead of citing case law, she brought campaign slogans. It was like showing up to a gunfight with a butter knife, and Judge Chen was ready to prove why that strategy fails in federal court. This showdown was more than a clash between a judge and a politician. It was a test of whether the legal system could resist the political pressure that had been mounting since Trump took office. Every time a Trump ally steps into a federal courtroom expecting special treatment, they challenge the independence of the judiciary. For Chen, this was about defending the principle that no one, not even the most powerful, gets to bend the law to their will. Even the future attorney general wasn't above the law. For Bondi, this was her chance to show she could handle the legal responsibilities of being Trump's top law enforcement officer. The cameras were rolling because the hearing would decide whether Trump's immigration policies could proceed, but unexpectedly, it would also test whether Bondi was truly fit to be Attorney General. The trouble began the moment she spoke, entering Judge Chen's courtroom with the confidence of someone used to Trump rallies. She started her argument as if addressing a crowd of supporters instead of a federal judge. "Your Honor," Bondi began, her voice carrying that familiar Florida political tone, "this administration has every right to enforce immigration law as we see fit," Bondi declared. "The American people elected President Trump to secure our borders, and that's exactly what we're going to do," Judge Chen raised an eyebrow. "In federal court, election results aren't legal justification. You need actual laws, precedents, and constitutional principles." But Bondi pressed on with her usual political theater. "Miss Bondi," Chen interrupted, calm but firm, "I'm not interested in campaign slogans. I need you to cite the specific legal authority that allows the government to implement these policies." For a moment, Bondi looked flustered. In politics, passionate speeches usually carry the day, but Chen's courtroom followed different rules. "Well, Your Honor," she continued, rattled, "the president has broad executive powers on immigration the Constitution gives him. Please cite the exact constitutional provision and any relevant case law." Chen cut her off. The courtroom went silent. Legal observers exchanged glances. This wasn't how Trump allies usually got treated. Chen wasn't playing games, and Bondi was realizing she was out of her depth. Under pressure, she tried to change tactics, pulling out her phone. Bondi's next move drew disapproving looks from court staff as she pulled out her phone and began scrolling for talking points. "Your Honor, if I may," she said, her confidence starting to crack. "We have extensive precedent from previous administrations, the Obama administration, the Bush administration, they all used executive power too." Chen cut her off again, his patience thinning. "Are you seriously trying to argue your case using your phone in my courtroom?" The question hit like a thunderclap. Experienced lawyers in the gallery were stunned. A potential attorney general was attempting to argue a federal case with phone notes instead of real legal research. Bondi quickly put the phone away, stammering, "No, Your Honor, I was just..." "You were just what?" Chen pressed. "Please tell me you have actual legal briefs prepared for this hearing." What followed revealed the core problem with Bondi's approach. When Chen asked for specific legal citations, she couldn't provide them. When he asked about relevant precedents, she gave political speeches. When he demanded constitutional analysis, she offered campaign slogans. "Ms. Bondi," Chen said, his voice sharpening, "you are asking this court to approve policies that affect thousands of lives. You want me to set aside existing legal protections, and your justification is that the president won the election?" "Election, Your Honor," Bondi said, her frustration now obvious. With all due respect, the American people spoke clearly when they elected Donald Trump. They want secure borders, law and order, and... Chen's voice cut through the courtroom like a knife. One word, "stop," echoed off the walls. Everyone froze, the gallery, the court reporters' fingers hovering over the keys. Even the bailiff straightened. Judge Chen had done something rare in federal court. He shut down a speaker mid-sentence. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Bondi, expecting a routine political performance, suddenly realized she was facing a judge who had no patience for her theatrics. Legal experts in the gallery scribbled notes furiously. They were witnessing something unprecedented. A federal judge delivering what would soon be remembered as one of the sharpest judicial takedowns in recent memory. Chen leaned back, eyes fixed on Bondi, as silence stretched across the courtroom. Minutes or what felt like minutes, though it was likely only seconds passed before Chen spoke again. His voice was calm, controlled, and utterly devastating. "Ms. Bondi," Chen said slowly, each word deliberate. "In 30 years on this bench, I have seen lawyers present weak cases, defend unpopular causes, and tackle difficult legal positions. But I have never, and I mean never, seen someone come into my courtroom so fundamentally unprepared for the basic requirements of legal argument." The courtroom was silent. Bondi's face turned pale. Nothing was going according to any script she had prepared. "You cite no law, reference no precedent, and provide no constitutional analysis," Chen continued, his voice gaining strength. "Instead, you offer campaign slogans and election results, as if my courtroom were a political rally." Every lawyer in the room was hanging on his words, recognizing the force of what was happening. Everyone in the room sensed what was coming. Judge Chen was building to a moment that would leave a lasting mark, and Pam Bondi was about to face a judicial rebuke that would be remembered for years. Chen paused, letting his previous words sink in. The courtroom was utterly silent. Bondi stood there, clearly struggling to respond to a federal judge who had just methodically dismantled her entire approach. "Your Honor," Bondi began, attempting to interject. "I think there may be some misunderstanding." "No, Ms. Bondi," Chen cut her off immediately. "There is no misunderstanding. The only question is whether you fundamentally do not understand how federal courts operate, or whether you simply chose to ignore those requirements because you assumed your political connections would be enough." His words landed like hammer blows. Chen wasn't merely criticizing her arguments, he was questioning her basic competence as a lawyer. In a room full of legal professionals, this was the equivalent of a public professional reckoning. It was an academic and professional assassination. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across social media and legal blogs. Judge Chen leaned forward, locking eyes with Pam Bondi, and delivered the line that would destroy her credibility in federal court forever. His voice was calm, measured, and absolutely final. "Ms. Bondi, I suggest you return to whatever political campaign hired you, because you clearly have no business practicing law in a federal courtroom." This hearing is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. The devastating simplicity of Chen's words hit everyone at once. He hadn't just ruled against her arguments, he had essentially declared that a potential attorney general was unqualified to practice law in his courtroom. The words echoed through the marble chambers like a death sentence for her legal credibility. Court reporters, some with decades of federal experience, later admitted they had never seen anything like it. One veteran journalist even whispered to his colleague, stunned by the scene. A colleague whispered, "I've seen judges get angry, I've seen lawyers get destroyed. But I've never seen a federal judge essentially end someone's legal career with a single sentence." Bondi stood frozen for several seconds, mouth slightly open, clearly unable to process what had just happened. Her carefully styled blonde hair looked disheveled, and her professional composure was completely shattered. In all her years of political theater, no one had ever shut her down so thoroughly and so publicly. The silence stretched, each second more unbearable than the last. "Your Honor," she stammered, attempting to speak. "Ms. Bondi," Chen interrupted one final time, "my ruling stands. Please exit my courtroom." What Judge Chen had done was the legal equivalent of dropping a nuclear bomb. In the formal, procedural world of federal court, telling a lawyer they have no business practicing law in your courtroom is as savage as it gets. Legal experts in the gallery could hardly believe what they had witnessed. Everyone in the courtroom immediately grasped the gravity of what had just happened. Chen hadn't merely ruled against the Trump administration's policies, he had personally and professionally shattered the credibility of their chosen advocate. The court reporter typed furiously, knowing every word of this exchange would be dissected and quoted for years. Even the bailiff edged closer to the bench, sensing the tension in the room. Bondi made one last desperate attempt to recover. "Your Honor, I believe we may have gotten off on the wrong foot," she said, her voice now shaky. "Perhaps if we could reschedule this hearing, I could return with more comprehensive." Chen didn't let her finish. "Ms. Bondi, let me be absolutely clear," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority. "You will not be rescheduling anything in my courtroom. You will not be returning with more comprehensive anything. You have demonstrated today that you lack the basic legal competence required to appear before this court." Then Chen did something that turned this from a mere legal rebuke into a moment of historic courtroom devastation. Chen elevated the moment into a constitutional lesson, addressing not just Bondi, but the broader implications of what had just happened. "This court will not be turned into a political theater," he declared, his voice echoing through the room. "The law is not a campaign rally. Constitutional rights are not talking points. And federal court is not a place where political connections replace legal competence." The message was both clear and crushing. Chen wasn't merely rejecting Bondi's arguments, he was rejecting the entire Trump approach that treats legal institutions as political tools. Legal observers in the courtroom recognized the rarity of what they were. Witnessing federal judges seldom rebuke lawyers this thoroughly, especially those tied to a presidential administration. Chen had just delivered a masterclass in judicial independence. Several reporters scribbled furiously, knowing they were witnessing history. Reporters immediately began typing on their phones, knowing they had just witnessed a moment that would dominate legal and political news for weeks. Hashtags formed in their minds: Chen destroys Bondi, judicial smackdown, Bondi meltdown. As the weight of Chen's words sank in, the courtroom's energy shifted. Bondi, still standing at the defendant's table, glanced around as if expecting someone to save her, but in Judge Chen's courtroom, there was no higher authority to appeal to. The bailiff stepped forward, not aggressively, but clearly ready to escort her out if she resisted the judge's order. The message was unmistakable. When a federal judge tells you to leave, you leave. Bondi finally realized her political theatrics hadn't just failed, they had spectacularly backfired. She gathered her papers with trembling hands, her face flushed with embarrassment, fully aware that her credibility had been irreparably damaged. As Bondi stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, Judge Chen offered one final remark that would become the most quoted line of the confrontation. "Perhaps this will serve as a reminder to future litigants that in federal court, the only authority that matters is the Constitution and the law, not Twitter followers or presidential endorsements." The door closed behind Bondi with a firm click, leaving a courtroom full of legal professionals who had just witnessed history. Within minutes of her humiliating exit, social media erupted. Clips, commentary, and reactions spread like wildfire. The phrase "no business practicing law" began trending on Twitter faster than anyone had seen for a legal story. The first viral clip came from a legal blogger who had live-streamed the hearing. The 30-second video of Judge Chen telling Bondi to return to whatever political campaign hired you racked up 500,000 views in the first hour alone. Chen destroys Bondi quickly became the top trending hashtag, with legal experts, political commentators, and everyday citizens weighing in on the courtroom showdown. The verdict was clear. Pam Bondi had just faced one of the most crushing judicial shutdowns in recent memory. The legal community responded swiftly and sharply. Harvard Law professor Lawrence Tribe tweeted, "In 40 years of practicing law, I've never seen a federal judge deliver such a thorough and justified destruction of a lawyer's credibility." Judge Chen just reminded everyone why judicial independence matters. The American Bar Association posted a Twitter thread explaining the legal significance of Chen's ruling. highlighting that his critique of Bondi's lack of preparation would likely be cited in law schools for years as a prime example of how not to argue before a federal judge. Legal Twitter was especially brutal. One federal prosecutor wrote, "Watching Pam Bondi try constitutional law with talking points was like watching someone attempt surgery with a butter knife." Judge Chen had spared the courtroom from that kind of malpractice. Even conservative media struggled to respond. How do you defend someone a federal judge just declared unqualified to practice law? Fox News initially tried to frame it as an activist judge attacking a Trump nominee, but even their legal analysts couldn't justify Bondi's performance. Judge Andrew Napolitano appeared on air, saying, "I've known Pam Bondi for years, but what happened in that courtroom today was indefensible. You cannot argue federal law with campaign slogans." Newsmax tried blaming liberal media bias, but the issue was clear: the entire hearing had been live-streamed. There was no editing, no selective quoting, just raw footage of Bondi being methodically dismantled by a federal judge. Behind the scenes, the Trump transition team was in full crisis mode. Bondi wasn't just any lawyer, she was Trump's pick for attorney general. Her public humiliation by a federal judge raised serious doubts about Trump's judgment and his team's competence. Sources inside the transition team said Trump was furious over the media coverage, but even his closest advisors privately admitted that Bondi's performance had been disastrous. The pressing question became whether Trump would stick with her or cut his losses. Conservative legal scholars who had initially supported Bondi's nomination began quietly distancing themselves. The Federalist Society, which had endorsed her appointment, released a carefully worded statement on the importance of thorough legal preparation, widely understood as a subtle critique of Bondi's courtroom showing. The legal establishment wasn't just criticizing her arguments. They were questioning her fundamental readiness for the role. Bondi's courtroom meltdown quickly became a teaching moment for the legal world. Constitutional law professor Erwin Sherminsky wrote in the Los Angeles Times, "Judge Chen's response to Pam Bondi should be required viewing in every law school in America. This is what happens when political theater meets legal reality, and legal reality always wins." The Yale Law Journal blog published a detailed analysis titled, "When Political Loyalty Meets Constitutional Law: The Bondi-Chen Confrontation and the Future of Legal Advocacy," which became one of the year's most read legal articles. Beyond serious analysis, the internet's meme machine exploded. Images of Bondi's shocked face when Chen told her to leave became instant classics, inspiring thousands of variations with captions like, "When you realize campaign talking points," or legal arguments. TikTok users created compilation videos set to dramatic music, contrasting Bondi's confident entrance with her humiliated exit. The most popular, "How to Destroy Your Career in 15 Minutes," racked up over 2 million views in just 24 hours. Reddit's legal communities had a field day. The top post in r law simply read, "Judge Chen just ended Pam Bondi's legal career with one sentence, discuss." The thread drew over 15,000 comments, mostly from lawyers sharing their own courtroom disasters. The political fallout extended far beyond one failed hearing. Democrats quickly seized on the moment as evidence of Trump's poor judgment in selecting nominees. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer released a statement, "If Pam Bondi can't handle one federal judge asking for basic legal citations, how can she manage being the nation's top law enforcement officer?" This is exactly why we need thorough confirmation hearings. Even some Republican senators privately expressed concerns. Senator Susan Collins was overheard telling a colleague that the courtroom footage raised serious questions about Bondi's competence issues that would need to be addressed in confirmation hearings. For Judge Chen, the confrontation became a defining moment in his judicial career. Legal historians immediately began comparing it to other iconic displays of judicial independence, such as Judge Sirica during Watergate or Judge Jackson in the Pentagon Papers case. The Federal Judges Association, which rarely comments on individual cases, issued a statement praising Chen for upholding the highest standards of judicial independence and legal competence. The statement sent a clear message: the federal judiciary would not be swayed by political pressure. Chen himself remained characteristically quiet amid the media attention, though court sources reported he had received hundreds of supportive messages from judges nationwide, applauding his defense of judicial standards. Legal scholars quickly began examining the broader implications of the Chen Bondi confrontation, agreeing that Chen had drawn a firm line. Federal courts would not tolerate the politicization of legal proceedings. The ruling had immediate effects. Other Trump allies who had planned to rely on political theater in court quietly revised their strategies. Law firms handling Trump-related cases began prioritizing legal research over political messaging. The American Bar Association announced it would use the Chen Bondi confrontation as a case study in its continuing legal education programs, highlighting the importance of thorough preparation and professional competence. As the dust settled, the pressing question remained: could Pam Bondi survive as Trump's Attorney General nominee? Analysts noted that her confirmation hearings would now inevitably focus on her competence rather than her loyalty or political alignment. Democratic senators were already preparing questions based on Chen's critique. Senator Elizabeth Warren announced she would ask Bondi to explain how someone unqualified to argue a case in federal court could be deemed fit to run the Justice Department. Conservative legal groups that had initially supported Bondi began to hedge their support. The Heritage Foundation, which had praised her selection, issued a new statement, emphasizing that nominees must demonstrate both loyalty and competence. Most importantly, the Chen Bondi confrontation became a symbol of constitutional governance prevailing over political theater. Legal scholars noted that Chen's insistence on actual legal arguments rather than political talking points exemplified the kind of judicial independence the founders had envisioned. This wasn't just about one judge embarrassing one lawyer, it was a reaffirmation of the fundamental principle that in America, the law is supreme, regardless of political connections or campaign promises. As the story continued to dominate news and social media, one fact became unmistakable: Judge Edward Chen had delivered more than a ruling, he had delivered a masterclass in judicial independence and constitutional governance. Pam Bondi had entered the courtroom expecting political theater, only to leave learning that in federal court, the only performance that matters is competent legal advocacy. Her public humiliation became a powerful reminder that in America's constitutional system, no one, not even a future attorney general, is above the law. The phrase "no business practicing law" would follow Bondi for the rest of her career, but more importantly, it served as a warning to other political figures who might confuse campaign rallies with courtrooms. Judge Chen's ruthless shutdown wasn't just legal drama, it was democracy in action, with an independent judiciary standing firm against political pressure and demanding the highest standards of legal expertise. If you found this breakdown of Judge Chen's devastating shutdown as incredible as we did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more moments when our legal system stands up to political theater. The comments are already buzzing. Drop yours below and share your thoughts on this judicial masterclass. Who do you think will be the next political figure to learn that federal court isn't a campaign rally?